This is a big deal. This is gonna change the way that you write hello world in C++. That's how big of a deal this is. It used to be this. In fact, even worse, this. And I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw this when I was just teaching myself programming back when I was 16, and young Cherno was like, ooh, C++, like a low-level language that games and game engines are written in. I'm so interested in this, let me take a look at it. Oh, why are they bit shifting the string into what does count mean? By the way, if you think that I'm making up this story because why would a 16-year-old who's just started learning programming know what a bit shift operator is? It's because the thing that got me into programming in the first place was writing a 3D renderer. And it's pretty common to use bit operations in graphics and rendering programming, such as to separate out all the channels of a color that's packed into an integer, for example. So yeah, true story. Anyway, I took one long look at this monstrosity and I was like, yeah, nah. And so from the age of 16 to around the age of 19, I didn't program in C++. I stuck with Java. But then when I just turned 20, I started working at EA, and of course they use C++, so I learned C++, and it became my language of choice. That's right, it took working at EA to get me to use C++. And you know what, somewhat anecdotally, I'm gonna go ahead and blame it on this. I'm gonna go ahead and blame this on bit shifting strings into counts, but no more. A new breed of C++ developers is about to hit the market because this monstrosity is finally changing. Starting from C++ 23, which sounds like a while ago because, you know, C++ 23 corresponds with 2023 and it's like 2025. But on the latest version of Visual Studio, as of the 23rd of June 2025, if we go into our project and properties, C++, and language, to use C++ 23, you have to go past ISO C++ 20 standard to the preview features from the latest C++ working draft. So halfway through 2025, in Visual Studio, MSVC, pretty major compiler, still does not list C++ 23 as like its own thing. It's just it's preview. It's features from the latest working draft, which by the way, you will have to set to this if you want to follow along with all the code I'm gonna write in this video. Well, not all the code, not this. So yeah, I'm not exactly 2 years late to the party because the party is really just beginning. And obviously if you are working on any kind of major projects, you will probably not be able to update your C++ version in a while. That's usually how it works, but that's a different story. Anyway, as of C++ 23, subject to your compiler and toolchain and whatever else, you should be able to include print instead of IOStream and use this amazing function called std println. That's right, just like Java, just like C#. I mean, C# has a write-line, but anyway, we have we have a println function in C++. Oh. This is exciting. This is, come on. I'm not playing this up for the camera or YouTube. This is exciting. Let me execute this program to show you that this is in fact reality and not a fantasy world. We did it. There's gonna be a time where our current generation or older generations are gonna look at the new generations of people and be like, they don't even know what this is. That no one knows what this is. None of the kids know what this is. You know, back in my day, we used to bit shift left our strings into counts. It's gonna be like floppy disks. It's gonna be like floppy disks. You know what, speaking of new generation things and improvements to current workflows and tools, let me introduce Codex, the sponsor of this video. Codex is a really fun, intuitive way to manage software projects, particularly games. In fact, it's actually made by game developers, centralizing everything from brainstorming to bug tracking and community feedback. Put simply, it offers what other generic tools can't, a playful process to ship better games that's faster and smoother for everyone. It's unique and it's super fun to use. It makes the whole project management into a game itself. So for example, here is my Genesis 3D project. I'm remaking the first game I ever made in 3D in Hazel. I've got my hand. These are tasks that I'm currently working on and that I want to start working on soon. I've got all of these different decks that signify different areas of work that needs to be done. And then there's another tab here called Timeline where I can basically mark out various milestones of when I want to get groups of tasks done. done. The process is pretty simple. I can go into like these decks, create various different cards, fix that annoying bug, save that card to my deck or directly to my hand, give it various properties such as effort, required to actually complete the task, various priorities. Once I put it into my hand, I can hit play over here to signify that I'm actually working on that particular task. And then when it's done, I can move it into my done pile. And all of this is super elegant, super fun to use. You can see it really makes this whole process into a card game. And there are so many more cool features such as journeys, which kind of define the process of completing tasks, as well as integrations with things like Discord and Steam for community management. So go ahead and check out Codex using my link in the description below to make better games in a better way. Huge thank you to Codex for sponsoring this video. Okay, Cherno, so did you really make a video all about the fact that there's a new way to write hello world in C++? Not quite, because there's a lot more to this than, believe me, this is a good video. There's a lot more to this than just this, to the point that I would say that logging is now much better in C++ than it ever was before. In fact, really this kind of started with C++ 20, because C++ 20 introduced this new thing called format, std format, or standard format. What that allows you to do is basically format a string in a much more user-friendly or developer-friendly way. So for example, you can write something like speed is, and then these curly brackets followed by a parameter like 5.5f. You can put any type you want into here, and you don't need to specify it in the actual string. However, the type that you put in here does actually need some kind of definition that tells it how to convert itself to a string, because otherwise this wouldn't exactly work. As you would expect, all of the primitive types and most of the kind of built-in types do already support this conversion, but if you're using like a class or a struct that you've written, a custom type, then of course you'll have to create an implementation for this string conversion. You can also write multiple things, like for example, specifying another parameter, and you can use whatever types you want over here. And the result of this format is an std string. So this is basically the string that we have created. I'll go ahead and print it the old school way that our elders will remember to show that this is the only kind of modern functionality we're using. And you can see our string prints here correctly as you would expect. Now this itself is a fairly new contribution to C++, being introduced in C++ 20, and it really is like the backbone for this whole new print functionality. And this actually comes from something called FMT. FMT is like a formatting library that has been around for a very long time, and you can see FMT print and FMT format. This has been around for a very long time, and the author of this library is the one who actually submitted the proposal to the C++ committee to get this into the core language. So we have this guy to thank. I actually don't know what his name is. Anyway, thank you, guy. And like, this library is good. It's really good. I've been using it for years. Everyone's been basically using this. That's why this actually made it into the standard and into the standard library. FMT is actually what Speedlog uses for its formatting. So Speedlog is a very good and popular fast C++ logging library that I have been using since like the very beginning of the Game Engine series back in like 2018. And you can see that it has feature-rich formatting using the excellent FMT library. So I've been using Speedlog and then also FMT in Hazel since the beginning for all of our logging and string formatting needs. In fact, in Hazel, if we go to log.h, which is the header for all the logging stuff, you can see that our macros here, they now use std format to actually format the string. Because Hazel uses C++ 20, this used to be FMT format. And then finally, this logger stuff that's going on over here to actually log everything uses Speedlog, as you can see over here. So slowly, we are kind of moving from third-party libraries to just having this stuff in the actual C++ standard library, which I think is great. So since std format was introduced in C++ 20, std print, the standard print, I don't know. I don't really like saying standard instead of std. I just always end up saying std because that's what's written. I know it kind of stands for standard, but maybe I should do a poll or something. Anyway, I don't care. I'm going to keep saying std. Std print in C++ 23, There's actually two versions of this. There's print and there's println. Println is simply print with like a new line character at the end, as you would expect. It basically does this. So if we have a look at the definition here, you can see that it can take in this format string. And then if we take a look at the print implementation, then over here, it's going to be using std v format, which is just a variant of std format, which is kind of based off of that fmt format library that we were just talking about. So what that means is back in our code, we can just take this and simply print this. We don't need to first format our string and then convert it to like an std string and then send that into cout, as would have been the case in C++20. We can just do std println. Here is our string, our format string, which defines all of our parameters and the actual, layout of what gets printed, as well as all of the variables as arguments. We can run this, and there you go. There's the result. If we have a look at cppreference.com, that of course has some more information. You can see that all of this stuff was introduced in C++23. However, for some reason, println with no arguments was only introduced in C++26. So we're gonna have to wait basically longer for that, which is a little bit annoying. If you're wondering what on earth println with no arguments would do, it would just print a blank line. So if you want to print a blank line, you still have to, I guess, do std print with a new line character in there. Or you could do cout, shift left, std end line or something, but that will have other functionality as well, technically. Here it is, valid since C++26, same effect as std print new line. But what about custom types? What if I want to make this work with like a glm vec2, or I have my own struct over here called point with x and y? How do I get that to easily print so that I don't have to manually type out all of the variables inside it? Well, you can use this template specialization over here. So what we're doing is we're creating a subclass of this class, which has our type over here. And then we are adding this function, auto format. We're taking in the actual variable. We're taking in this format context, and then you have to make sure it's also const, and it will return this std formatter string format with an std format inside here. And this format context is taken in as an argument. This is a little bit confusing. It just has to be defined in this particular way. If you get the definition wrong, so like for example, if I forget const and you try and compile, there are several static asserts inside this make format args that will actually tell you what you're doing wrong reasonably well, as long as you can like look up the standard. So for example, if you forget the const thing, it will tell you to make the formatter usable, add const to format. Otherwise, if you just don't have a definition for that at all, it will say that it cannot format an argument, and to make t, your custom type, formattable, provide a formatter t specialization, and there's some instructions over here inside the standard. But if you don't forget const, then over here, using this actual std format, you can see I'm specifying how I want my point to be printed, and then I'm adding it over here. I've just got a basic point here, 2.8, and I'm printing it here. Point is, and then that. And if I run that, you can see that my point is 2.8. So yeah, long story short, C++ now kind of has like a logging library slash formatting library. Again, really the bulk of this functionality is due to std format, which has been around since C++20. So most projects that aren't huge scale corporate C++ projects that are probably still on like C++03, all of your projects should almost definitely be on C++20 by now. So you should still have std format, even if you don't have std println. But std print and std println just make this kind of formatting a little bit easier, because now it's in the actual print function, rather than first having to use std format, getting a string from that, and then putting that into like printf or into std cout or into your own logging library. I kid you not when I say that this is probably one of my favorite additions to C++23. There are some other good ones, which I probably will cover soon. In fact, maybe I should just make a video talking about all the new C++23 features now that it's beginning to get some adoption. Let me know if you want to see that in the comment section below. But otherwise, what do you think of this new print functionality? Isn't it a big deal? I mean, hello world has changed. Come on, it's a big deal. I mean, std format is a bigger deal in my opinion. That's actually a huge reason to jump up to C++20. I don't know if this itself is a reason for existing projects, which probably have their own logging functionality, to actually jump up to C++23. However, I think I'm going to be starting new projects with C++23 from now on and just using these print functions. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to check out Codex using my link in the description below, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.